afterthought.org brings you panning strategies, creating width without losing focus. Welcome everyone to this explainer. Have you ever sat back in your studio chair, pulled up your latest track right next to a pristine commercial release, and just wondered, why does mine sound like it's trapped inside a cardboard box? Well, if you've ever felt like your tracks are kind of muddy, blurry, or they just lack that massive, expensive, three-dimensional sound we all hear on our favorite records, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to completely change how you look at the stereo field. Okay, let's dive right into our roadmap. We're going to start with the philosophy of real panning, move into protecting the sacred center, and then explore how width comes from contrast. From there, we'll get into instrument placement, talk about space and glue, and finish up with some final checks. Section 1. The philosophy of real panning. Stop waiting for someone else to make your record sound expensive. For us indie artists working out of home studios, panning is an incredibly powerful tool. And the best part? It's completely free. It's honestly often the exact thing that separates a blurry amateur mix from an exciting professional arrangement. A lot of folks fall into this trap of treating panning like, decorating a room. Just opening a mix, randomly throwing a guitar to the left, another to the right, shoving a hi-hat over there, just totally random window dressing. And it fails because it totally lacks purpose. Things just keep bumping into each other. But the professional mindset, that's all about arrangement. Real panning is storytelling. Think of your mix as a literal three-dimensional stage. It's how you intentionally direct the listener's attention, giving every single piece of the puzzle a defined job and letting those instruments actually breathe. There's this really powerful quote from makingascene.org that I want to let sink in for a second. Width is not something you buy, width is something you design. A huge professional mix absolutely requires intention. It doesn't need a $2,000 compressor or some secret industry plugin. Designing width means you're making really deliberate EQ choices, strategically arranging parts so they aren't fighting, and actually leaving intentional empty space in your track. You really got to learn the craft and own the process to get that massive scale. Section 2. Protecting the sacred center, the spine of your mix. Now, what's really interesting about this is understanding the very first major technical mistake beginners make, which is trying to clear up a crowded track by simply shoving everything away from the center. Look, the center is not your enemy. Think of it like center stage at a giant concert. These core elements act as the structural and emotional anchor of your whole track. The lead vocal is your lead actor. The show literally doesn't make sense if they disappear, right? Then you've got the kick drum and bass. Low frequencies carry massive physical energy, which is exactly why they demand that center anchor point to give you a stable foundation. Add in your snare drum to lock down the groove, and boom, you have your spine. If you hollow out this center, your track entirely loses its power. Section 3. Width comes from contrast, avoiding the fog. Makingascene.org warns us about a massive trap in modern recording. Stereo plugins make it so incredibly easy to spread everything out that beginners literally spread everything. The result? A mix that feels like a thick, blurry fog. Think about it. If everything is huge all the time, nothing actually stands out. To fix this, makingascene.org recommends a super practical workflow, highlighting setups like Fender Studio Pro. Step 1, pull all your faders all the way down. Step 2, build your core mix in mono, or at least very narrow stereo. Now, why is this so brilliant? Because when everything is stacked right there in the center, frequency masking, where instruments hide each other, becomes glaringly obvious. Step 3 basically forces you to solve those actual balance and EQ issues right then and there to carve out space, rather than just lazily panning the problem away. Only then, in step 4, do you start panning those secondary parts outward to create that much-needed striking contrast. Section 4. Instrument Placement Strategies. Guiding the listener. Let's move from theory straight into practice and talk about exactly where to place specific instruments. First up, vocals. You absolutely have to keep the story in the middle. The lead vocal is the face of your song. When it's centered, the emotional identity is locked firmly in place, and the listener doesn't have to chase lyrics around their headphones. But hey, centered doesn't mean boring. You can totally use things like a subtle slapback delay to create incredible depth right behind the vocal without widening it so much that it loses its punch. And those background vocal doubles, those should spread out and wrap beautifully around that lead vocal, enhancing the emotion instead of sounding like they're escaping into a completely different zip code.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we should handle things like layered guitars. Copy-pasting an identical guitar track and panning it hard left and right is a huge mistake beginners make all the time. It does not create width. It usually just makes the center louder and causes some really nasty phase issues. What's a phase issue? It's basically when identical sound waves collide and cancel each other out, creating this hollow, swishy, weak sound that just completely guts the power of your instrument. But if you record two entirely different performances, with those tiny natural differences in timing, pick attack, or tone, you get genuine, massive, natural stereo width that sounds expensive and incredibly full. For drums, you basically have a stylistic choice: audience perspective or drummer's perspective. Are the hi-hats slightly to the left, like you're sitting on the drum stool, or slightly right, like you're standing in the crowd? Honestly, either way is totally fine, but your ultimate goal is consistency. Keep that kick and snare dead center for pure authority. Move your toms naturally across the field, nothing cartoonishly wide. Always check your overheads for those phase issues we just talked about, and place secondary percussion, like shakers and tambourines, slightly off-center to create this wonderful, subtle movement that really lifts your chorus. Section 5. Space, glue, and effects. Designing gravity and keeping things connected. We are literally designing gravity here. This is where we look at tricky elements like bass, keys, and effects that can beautifully glue a track together or just completely tear it apart. Here is your golden low-end rule. Keep the bass central. Like we said earlier, low frequencies carry the physical weight of your track. If your bass or your 808 spreads out too wide, you will absolutely kill your mono punch. Why? Because physical subwoofers in clubs, car stereos, and Bluetooth speakers are almost always mono. If your low end is super wide, those frequencies just phase out and disappear on playback. Sure, you can widen the upper distorted harmonics on a synth bass for some cool texture, but you must keep those fundamental subfrequencies dead center to keep the track heavy.
If your mix feels kind of disconnected, you need what we call spatial glue. You can get this by using shared reverbs, so all your instruments sound like they're in the exact same physical room. Maintain a consistent room tone, and use complementary panning. So if you've got a heavy guitar panned hard left, balance that musical weight by putting a keyboard softly panned over to the right. And here's a really pro-level trick. Pan the effect instead of the instrument. Instead of widening a synth and risking phase issues, try keeping the actual synth strictly in mono, but pan its lush reverb or delay to the opposite side of the stereo field. It creates immense width while keeping your core sound perfectly intact and super punchy.
Section 6. Final mix checks. The truth your ears can miss. So the crucial point is we're entering our final phase, focusing on the absolute essential technical reality checks you've got to do before calling a mix finished. Because sometimes the truth is something your ears alone can completely miss. A vital concept here is pan law. This is how your digital audio workstation automatically adjusts volume as a mono sound moves across the stereo field. Say you move a guitar from dead center over to hard right, your software might naturally boost its volume by like 3 decibels to compensate for how human ears perceive width. You have to remember to pull that fader back down to maintain your original balance. Every single panning move changes your volume perception. Next up is the magic mono button. Checking your mix in mono is not optional, okay? It is strictly mandatory. When you collapse your pristine, super wide mix into mono, it's obviously going to sound narrower, but the important parts must survive that transition. If your lead vocal suddenly disappears, your snare gets hopelessly weak, your guitars vanish, or your reverbs turn into this strange, phasey mess, you know for sure you've gone way too far with the stereo width. You have to make sure excessive stereo spreading isn't completely destroying the core of your song across different, maybe less than ideal listening devices.
Let's move to and see how this builds into our ultimate pre-bounce quality checklist, sourced directly from makingascene.org. Step 1. Listen really quietly and make sure the center still makes complete musical sense at low volumes. Step 2. Verify that your left sides have equal musical weight so the track doesn't feel totally lopsided. Step 3. Collapse the mix to mono to ruthlessly check for those phase issues we just covered. And Step 4. Check the separation on your headphones. Sometimes hard-panned high frequencies that sound amazing on studio monitors can actually feel really annoying or piercing when blasted directly into just one ear on headphones.
We're going to end on this vital, provocative question. Does the panning actually serve the song? Look, panning is never about showing off fancy plugins or looking pro on your computer screen. If the verse needs to be beautifully narrow and intimate so the chorus can just explode out wide and massive, do exactly that.
Every decision should be about guiding the listener's emotional attention and making them genuinely feel the track. Without focus is just noise. With focus, now that is a record. Make sure you check out the other great articles and resources on makingascene.org, the place the indie artist goes to build the new music industry. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer today. Keep creating, and I'll see you next time.